Peter, are you able to hear us? Okay, great. I think we can get started then. Um, hey everybody, let's go ahead and hit the agenda. Let me also make sure, can everyone hear us on YouTube? Cool, so the first one is testing. That's just more if there are any updates that are relevant. I don't really know if there are for the fuzzer or for any of the test cases. I think Yoichi's the only one who might have some insight into that. Yoichi, do you know of anything?
For test cases, I'm doing that very slowly. I'm turning some test cases in the Google spreadsheet into red to green. In some cases, I share test case and I find it already in the repository and I turn it green and so on. So some bureaucracy is going on. For others, I see actually more activities, but I cannot really describe it. It's the best place is the fuzzing channel, but okay, it's private. Wow. No, I don't see anyone who can explain that in this meeting right now, unfortunately.
No problem. We can just talk about that the next meeting, or if Martin or Dimitri or anyone comes in, we can ask them. All right, moving on to item 2, the Byzantium fork review. So during DevCon 3, about 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with some of the core developers. We announced it in the channel, and it was an in-person meeting with about, I'd say at least 10 people, where we kind of talked about the issues that we had with the Byzantium release, some of the things we learned, and some of the things we might want to do better. There was a lot of different things discussed that could be possible future changes to how we do hard forks. The ones that were most discussed is having a dedicated release manager. That's something that's kind of a role that I served last time, but because I couldn't dedicate my full attention to it, a lot of things kind of got left behind, especially the EIPs surrounding Byzantium. So I think that having someone do the role in a full-time capacity, or maybe with a few other things in a related role, would be really good. So that is still a ways from, like deciding officially on that, finding anybody for that kind of thing. So I think that that'd be a good next step. The other thing is, maybe having a cadence for hard forks. So there's some different software projects that have release cycles. So like you do a release once every 2 weeks, or you do a release once every 6 months. Peter, I know Geth has something like that. Could you kind of give an example of how your project does releases or tries to stay on a schedule?
Sure. So, of course, for DevCon, we're a bit out of schedule now, but generally we try to do bi-weekly releases. And the idea is kind of simple. Whatever makes it to master gets released after 2 weeks. And if your feature didn't get on master in 2 weeks, then no problem. You have the next schedule or next release to get your stuff in. And as long as, the downside of this is that people can get annoyed that their favorite stuff didn't make it, but in general, it's actually quite beneficial, because as long as you have regular releases, you know that even though your stuff didn't make it in this release, you don't have to wait an eternity or who knows how much to get your stuff into next release. And this kind of worked well. So previously with the Geth 1.4 family, it took us ages to do releases because everybody wanted to get their stuff in, and we did releases every few months. So it was really painful if your stuff was left out. But since we switched over to this release model, all the friction got dropped. And I think we are discussing during DEF CON that this might be an interesting approach for hard forks too, because currently what happens during hard forks is that everybody has their pet EIP that they really would like to get included, and then basically we start to delay the hard forks because some EIP is missing, and because we have absolutely no idea when the next EIP will be. So one of the ideas was that if we could do a more or semi more regular hard forks to do protocol updates, then maybe we could just say that, well, okay, your EIP wasn't finished in time, no problem, it will be in the next one. Now, of course, maybe I will just give the word back to Hudson, but this obviously won't be such a tight schedule as 2 weeks or even 2 months, but rather much longer. But I think Hudson can pick up the pace from here.
Yeah, no, that was a great explanation. And exactly, it wouldn't be something like a 2-week release cycle. It'd be something like 6 to 8 month release cycle where you have a period of picking the EIPs, having a strict cutoff date, having kind of an implementation phase with a priority order for the EIPs, and then a very conservative testing phase with some rules on when we should raise a flag for postponing a hard fork, what are the conditions for that to happen, etc. Afri, I see you're also in the channel. Is there a release model that Parity generally follows that you would feel like describing at all, or?
Core release schedule. This means basically a new beta channel is opened every 6 weeks, but we are currently not. We are lagging a bit behind right now, but we are planning to do minor releases every 6 weeks.
Okay, cool. So yeah, basically one of the harder parts about this is figuring out the timing. How long of a time should the whole release cycle be, and then also within that, how long should it be for planning, implementation, testing, and any other minor phases in between those even. So some of the timelines discussed were a 6-month or 8-month full release timeline, with something like 1 month or 2 core dev meetings to decide what EIPs are going in for that 6 to 8 month period, and then like 4 months for implementation and 3 months for testing or something like that. It's still very, very early. These are still suggestions, but that's kind of what was discussed. Let me see. Can I get opinions in the room about any of this, especially if you have commented on this before?
Sure. So I'll start if nobody else wants. So the reason why I at least personally think this is a good idea is because one of the problems that we personally saw with Byzantium was that we had a lot of EIPs written up. They were kind of okay-ish ready, but there were a lot of information missing, and it was really, really hard to implement it and really hard to synchronize between different clients because, for example, Parity had an implementation that was one of the specs, and then the spec was updated, and then we implemented a different spec, and it gets messy from there. So if we could have some meaningful cutoff dates to, for example, arbitrarily many weeks to define what an EIP will do, and then we only change the spec if something really goes wrong with it, then at least client developers will have a stable thing to work based on. And then we don't have to postpone because somebody implemented a different spec. Rather, we could just have hard deadlines that, okay, you had 4 months, please do it. So it's much cleaner from an implementation perspective.
I agree. I think that also builds on stability. Any other comments on kind of this hard fork guidelines or future, flags we'd put in place? I know someone was taking notes. I think it was Martin, and he's not able to join today or right now. So we'll have to get those next time and discuss this in detail. But I remember there being a few conditions for delaying a hard fork. Maybe, oh, he'll be here in 5 minutes. Sweet. Okay. I might just wait for him to kind of say some of his thoughts as well. But are there any other opinions right now? Okay, cool. Yeah, if Martin comes in, we'll discuss it a little bit more. We'll back up to that topic, and if not, then we'll just discuss it next core dev meeting. So the next item, move EIPs activated in Byzantium to finalized. We are still behind on that. Additionally, I believe that Nick Savers on Gitter, that might be his actual name, I'm not sure. He had a PR that was similar to a PR that Afri wrote down, a meta EIP that described all the Byzantium changes. So Nick said that it doesn't link to the actual EIPs, his meta EIP that he made. So in that case, he can withdraw his PR in favor of the meta EIP that Afri has. So that'll be just fine, and so we're all aware of that. The next topic item, unless there is any comments on that.
Just a quick comment. I don't have any meta EIP. It's a misunderstanding. So his EIP can be merged.
Oh, you're right. I think it's Alex or Casey that has one. I could go look. Yeah, I'm looking it up right now, and I'm gonna go to pull request and search. Okay, yes. So this is, I think it was Casey's, and or maybe that's the process for finalizing. Regardless, someone wrote a meta EIP, so we'll just need to make sure that's completed and merged in. Hey Martin, welcome to the call. Can you hear us?
Thank you. Yes, sure.
Great. And then, does anyone know who Gas She is? Is that... Hello, whoever just joined, can you identify yourself, please? Oh, and it looks like Yoichi actually posted the EIP link, so let me go to that.
Yeah, Afri and I independently found it's 609. That's the meta EIP for Byzantium.
Okay.
And yes, it's cases.
Great. So whoever just entered, whose name is GHAS, could you identify yourself?
Hello.
Oh, hello. I'm not sure what your name is.
My name is Shinichi. I'm Japanese. And yeah, I'm interested in Ethereum for maybe 2 years. Yeah, I'd like to just listen the conversation because there was even I respect given word and
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah.
So I'll talk to you on Gitter after this, but thanks for joining.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so Martin, we were talking just a second ago, let me just run back to the agenda, about the hard fork guidelines we talked about during DevCon, and we kind of went over the basics of the potential for a 6 to 8 month release period per hard fork. Some of the like the fact that we might have some red flags that would stop us from releasing a hard fork or maybe delay it. We didn't really go into any of the signaling systems for that. We also said that it would be something like an testing or the choosing the EIPs, implementation, and release. So if you wanted to, I know you took notes during that we can bring up for next week's meeting once we get them a little cleaned up. But what is your opinion on the kind of the things we discussed at that meeting?
Right. So I have some notes about that, and I've sent them along to Nick. The idea was to start forming them into an EP. We haven't done so yet. But some of the things that it says in those notes is that yeah, we should have stricter requirements for the EAPs. Preferably have them implemented in this one client, but maybe otherwise some very detailed feasibility study. And yeah, regarding signaling, I don't know if we made any real progress, except to say that we really wanted to have more dynamic signaling systems. We also, yeah. So let's. I don't really want to present these notes as they are. I need to clean them up a bit and perhaps start turning them into an EP together with Nick and whoever wants to be part of it.
That's a great idea, and yeah, we'll be looking forward to that, especially if we can make the EAP and then iteratively work on it together as we kind of discuss in core dev meetings what the next steps will be, and hopefully eventually get some sort of release manager. All right, so let's move on to the next topic, which is the proof of authority testnet unification. Piper put that in, and I don't think he's able to make it today. So I'm gonna speculate on what he meant by that. I think that currently Rinkeby only works for Geth, and Parity, their Coven testnet only works for Parity. So I'm guessing Piper is probably talking about that, either that unification or the creation of a new proof of authority testnet that just works across all clients. So Peter, what's your opinion on that? And especially given that you have a new really awesome tool called Puppeth that starts to kind of bridge the gap between these things.
Yeah, I think the pain point is probably, and everybody kind of feels the pain point in the community too, is that it's kind of a pain to actually test your dApps across test networks, because Ropsten is, yeah, we know Ropsten, but even though Kovan and Rinkeby are both a potentially better alternative to Ropsten, they aren't really cross-compatible, so it's annoying. And I'm guessing Piper, the reason why he was asking to unify the testnet is because they started to pick up development on the Python client again. And I'm guessing they would also like to roll out a proof of authority consensus engine, but I don't think they want to implement two of them, or a third one for that matter. So that's why I think Piper brought up the subject. Now, with regard to the consensus engines in itself, I'm going to say, so basically currently we have two proof of authority test networks, Kovan from Parity based on Aura, and the Rinkeby test network from Geth based on Click. I'm not too familiar with the Aura, so I cannot meaningfully comment on that, but the reason why I'm personally not a big fan of that proof of authority test network is because it's a really complex scheme. So I think the Parity people really tried to make their proof of authority protocol actually meaningful for lots of various use cases and really flexible, which is really nice, but it also means that it's kind of hard to implement. Whereas the Click proof of authority protocol was kind of always meant as the simplest possible engine that just works and can be dumped on top of any other client implementation. So from my perspective, I do think Click is simpler. Now, regarding whether if people want to actually do a combined proof of authority testnet, whether we should stick with Click or maybe dream up a third one, that's from my perspective, it doesn't matter that much. But I kind of agree that it would be nice to have again, a common test network between clients.
Okay, cool. I don't think Arcady's here today, so I don't. Unless Afri, you want to give a comment from the parity side, it's no problem if you all don't have an opinion today, since this just got sprung up in the core dev meeting.
I totally agree. It would be nice to have a cross-client POA test network, but I can't really comment on any plans to add anything like click to parity right now.
No problem.
Yeah, I kind of agree that I think this is the friction point of this cross-client proof of authority test network, is that adding click to parity means it's a burden on parity people. Adding Aura to Geth means it's a burden on us, and basically it's a burden on every other client to implement either of them.
One thing to keep in mind with the two different POA protocols is that the parity one, as I understand, is contract based, whereas the Geth one, Rinkeby, is header based, and ultimately, as clients start implementing the Casper testnet, those will be contract-based consensus protocols.
Interesting. It's starting to sound like a good move would be a proposal for a third testnet that maybe starts to mimic some of the things that things like the future Casper testnet has. Especially, I mean, we're definitely going to have to go through the pros and cons of both of those approaches. It's way too early to do that yet, but that's interesting and something we should think about for the future core dev meetings, is if a third one should be created.
Actually, that was an interesting idea. So as far as I know, V was already working on having a Casper test network. I think maybe Vlad also.
Yes.
So one thing that, so basically adding various proof of authority to different clients will be a pain in the ass anyway. So maybe it's a long shot, but maybe we can try to instead add or start adding Casper. Just play around with that idea, or just a subset of Casper. I'm not sure. I don't know how far Casper it is, or whether it's actually usable on the test network. So maybe V, if you can give your ideas on.
Sure. So as I understand, there's already a full Python implementation of Casper, and a test network is, well, there have already been kind of successful momentary test networks between basically like two PyEth app nodes running on the same laptop, and we're currently trying to expand that and actually have it kind of run across the internet in a self-sustaining way. Though currently the obstacles have more to do with stuff involving PyEth app than stuff involving Casper. So theoretically, like basically, it's I'd even say it's getting to the point where it's ready for implementation in other clients too.
Okay, and then based on what you're saying, I would take that maybe, so if we want to aim stability with a test network, then maybe it won't be the best idea to make it based on Casper just about now.
Well, so the way that Casper works, right, is that you can have some clients that use the Casper Fortress rule and some clients that use the Proof of Work Fortress rule. And basically, unless there's an attack, then the two of them should always give the same answer. So you can, like the way that the Casper test.
You went.
Oh, Vitalik, your mic went out.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. You were saying how the Casper testnet works.
Yeah, so first of all, it only becomes a Casper test. Like the Casper part of the algorithm only turns on when the Casper contract is launched and it has enough Ether deployed. And even then, if an individual client is not Casper aware, then it can just keep following proof of work. So we could basically have a test network and literally test the entire transition on it if that's what we want to do.
My question really is that so with Ropsten, the reason people don't like to use Ropsten is because it's not reliable if somebody
Right.
decides that they want to attack. Now, the question is,
Yeah.
if we had a Casper test network, could we provide some guarantees that if I run 100
Yeah, okay, so the properties that Casper realistically has is that if an attacker has more than 50% of all the hash power, then they could do attacks that would prevent new blocks from being finalized, but they cannot revert any old blocks. So, I mean, you do have this kind of partial guarantee. And if we want to make the proof of stake side safe, then basically all we'd have to do is just like assign 90% of the ether to like 10 or 20 people that we trust and just run it between us.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all in all, it's an interesting idea, although it's probably quite heavy on the implementation side. But yeah, maybe we should explore this a bit. Maybe.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
So the reason why I was suggesting that maybe we could go down this path is because if we realistically want to roll out Casper in whichever hard fork, then eventually people need to start implementing it. And the Olympic network was really a fun network that fell apart quite a few times while implementations got it right. So maybe it would be nice to have a test network for this one that people actually want to use to hammer it apart. Anyway, I think, but I think this mostly depends on individual client developers actually looking into a protocol and seeing if it makes sense or not. Because it probably is a lot of work, and yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea as well. Okay. Are there any other comments on this topic? Cool. The next steps, if you guys could bring it back to your core teams and just kind of discuss this, and next week or 2 weeks from now come back with an opinion, that'd be great. I think that would help a lot.
Excuse me. I'm now considering an idea, which is how about implementing something like garbage collection? But it is not actually garbage collection, and only we will use only when suicide is called. So it's an idea that when a suicide is called, the contract which will suicide is listed on a waiting list, and then in the waiting list, if
I think that this is about a different topic, if I'm understanding correctly with the opcode. If you could go in and put this on the agenda and the issue section in GitHub, what we can do is we can move this to 2 weeks from now, where this might start being discussed. If you could do that, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if there's nothing else on the Proof of Authority testnet, the next thing would be the core team updates. So we can start. Oh, good. Piper's joining. Actually, we'll wait till he comes in and we can see what he was meaning on that, and we can just go over what we just talked about. Hey, Piper, can you hear us? Hey, Piper, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Perfect. We actually were just on your agenda topic for Proof of Authority testnet unification. So we went over the kind of the basis, the fact that there is Rinkeby that runs on Click, and Coven that runs on Aura. RinkB is headers based. Coven is contract based. And so we were either thinking maybe having a third proof of authority testnet, or if the goal is to have a cross-client testnet in general, maybe moving on to the Casper testnet that's already built in Python and having that be one of a second option for a cross-client testnet. So when you put in that agenda item, what was your intention?
Yeah, so my intention was actually just to form a small group out of this group to figure out what a common proof of authority based testnet that everybody could agree upon was. So I was hoping to get somebody from the Parity team, somebody from the Go team, and somebody from who's familiar enough with the Casper research at minimum, and then we could sort of take it from there and then come back with an idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So Go team, Parity team, and Casper team, if you guys could go back to your teams and get someone to reach out to Piper, or we can coordinate through the All Core Devs Gitter. I think that can definitely work out, and we can have like a separate Gitter channel.
Cool. Yeah, if you guys will maybe contact me directly, Gitter is a good way, and then we can set up a dedicated channel for this.
Perfect. Any other comments on that, Piper, or anyone else?
That's the extent of what I wanted to get done on that topic.
Perfect. All right, great. So let's go to the core team updates. So let's start with Go, I guess. And basically these updates are not for any hard forks, just anything you want to give a shout out about the project, anything you've implemented, or just any news updates.
Nope. So for now, we are just, so the most interesting update that I could give is that Felix is working on somehow figuring out or finalizing the EIP proposals for the new discovery protocol. And I'm kind of really looking forward to that, because that would actually allow nodes to properly find each other instead of kind of looking for needles in the haystack. But I think and that doesn't really have to do anything with Go Ethereum development. But I think that's the most interesting thing that that could be of interest to everybody.
Great. C++ with Christian.
We're looking for the unmute button. I think no updates from me because most of the developers are still on holidays.
Okay, no problem. Afri, anything with Parity?
No, not really. We have some changes in our team structure, so some core developers are not available anymore for the Parity Ethereum client, but we'll probably notice that you're talking to Afri or Marek instead of Arkady. And on the code side, we are doing some major refactoring, and we are having some upcoming code audits. So, but there's not much else I can bring up right now.
Okay, sounds good. And did you say that was Marek or you?
Probably Marek.
Okay, great. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. Let's see, Ethereum JSVM. I think that'd be Casey, or I'm trying to see if anyone else in the room.
Myself and Axic, Axic proposed a roadmap to an EWASM testnet. And I think right now we're aiming to get that up and running sometime in January.
Great. Ethereum J, Mikhail?
We have faced with a database issue, which causes a couple of annoying things like a huge memory footprint and the processing is getting slower. So we are working on, actually we are doing a research, and we think that it's a good time to switch database engine. We are looking at RocksDB. So this is the most important and the only one I think we are working at the moment. Yeah. So in the next release, we're going to have maybe a new database engine. We also implemented a snappy compression. So, okay, something like that. So,
Awesome.
that's it, I think.
Sounds good. Piper, let me know if I'm saying this wrong, but I believe that the client portion of your code base is PyEVM.
Maybe. We've got another name in mind, but I'm not quite ready for that yet.
Ooh, teaser.
But as far as PyEVM goes, we've got the Byzantium rules all passing in tests right now, which is an awesome milestone to hit. And the networking code for running it as a light client is coming along really well. So things are moving forward, and we have a general plan with the Casper research team for starting the initial parts of them migrating from the PyEthereum code base to PyEVM.
All right. And then Vitalik, PyEthap.
Not much on the ETHAP front. The main thing that although I know that the guys that are working on the test, on the Casper test, that are working on the test, and that'll involve probably some improvements to PyEthap. The stuff that's already happened is basically Python 3 compatibility. Other than that, most of what I personally have been focused on is more Casper and sharding research stuff, which is nothing very big, but a lot of progress on small things, including like Casper incentivization, stateless client design, Merkle tree optimization, gas rules, and a few other things. There is like about 5 or 10 threads on the ETH research forum.
Okay, great. And then Yoichi, I know you're working on a number of projects. I think Bamboo and maybe Isabel. I'm not sure if that falls into your field, but do you have any updates for your projects that you're working on, the research work?
For the core dev meeting, so the specification, so I'm now trying KEVM as a specification. I filed a very simple pull request to see how it's going to be merged, and I'm reading it through, trying to correct typos and so on. And I'm spending some time on the Casper accountable safety proof for the more realistic setting where the validator set can change.
Okay, great. I think that was. Anybody else in the room have any relevant updates to their clients or projects? All right. That's the last agenda item. Does anyone have any other agenda items that aren't listed?
Hudson, you forgot the Effie's item. He added one. He's probably added to the agenda. Last comment.
Let me check it.
So his question was whether we could have just a general idea of what we want to include in Constantinople. So not specific EIPs, just in general what to aim for.
That's a good idea. Does anyone want to comment on that? I know that Vitalik was kind of previously leading that conversation when we were discussing this during Byzantium. So I'll have Vitalik start, and then anyone else can chime in.
I'm not sure I have any new thoughts since Byzantium.
Yeah, well, what were if you could go over kind of the thinking during Byzantium about what you feel should be going in, or what should be going in.
Right, okay. So the ideas I had are basically to focus on state size control stuff. So I had those account deletion and like basically like dust account clearing EIPs that Gav made way back in the day. And if one thing we could possibly do as a next step for that is to just cut down, or to just do analyses and see, like, or ideally even just basically put out a sorted list of all accounts with their balance, and then we could just see, like, oh, like if we cut out all the accounts below some balance threshold, then how many would be left? Which could be interesting.
I can get you
aside from
I can give you a list. I mean, I can generate you one of those lists in.
Okay,
maybe.
yeah, sure. That would be great. Otherwise, the other thing I wanted to do is could try to take this time to make better implementations for the elliptic curve stuff. So based for like the precompilers that we did, so that we can reduce the gas costs to something comparable to SecP. I don't think I had any particular kind of big ideas aside from that.
Cool. All right. Anybody else have comments to that or things they add on that they might want to see in Constantinople? Yeah, I think it's important to have something that does help clean up the state a little bit. And additionally, anything that needs to be implemented to help with some of the future changes, particularly abstraction if we're still going down that path, or yeah.
Probably go ahead.
Oh no, that was all I had.
Okay, for abstraction, I could probably keep thinking about it more. The main debate is just like what version of abstraction.
With account abstraction, I think one of the things we need kind of to debate first is that bothers me the most is whether we allow a transaction to be included multiple times and what the consequences are. Mostly what I'm personally worried about is that currently at least a single hash, so every transaction is uniquely identified by a hash. Same goes for a receipt, so a hash can uniquely identify when it was included in a block. And if we allow a transaction to be included multiple times, then in theory it can lead to multiple hashes. It can lead multiple hashes to reference the same transaction. Or, oh Jesus Christ, I mixed up. So it can lead to one hash referencing multiple transactions. And this may be a strange thing for people in general. It may break software. So I don't mind doing this, but it should be really, really clear that we want to do this and what effects it will have.
Yeah, I think the reason the original account abstraction EIP allowed for didn't require unique hashes, so it allowed for the same transaction to be included as multiple hashes, was because it was sort of a half step to avoid changing the transaction format. So for
the reason why it allowed a new a hash to be occur twice is because it also tried to abstract the non-scheme. And the problem is that if you abstract the non-scheme, then it will be possible for someone to create a non-scheme that accepts anything. So if we want to avoid that, then we'd basically have to have an abstraction model that still forces the non-scheme to continue being in effect.
Yeah, I guess the question is whether the non-scheme is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, that can be debated.
This may not be the place for this sort of debate, but is it not? No, I'll do this on an EIP. I don't want to sidetrack us.
No worries. Okay. Any other comments on kind of the abstraction piece here?
I guess the more general question is whether an account abstraction EIP is in scope for Constantinople or.
And the current one is 86 the only EIP that talks or that proposes a way to do account abstraction or transaction origin abstraction?
Well, for example, if we keep the non-scheme somehow and we still enforce the non-scheme, then we still can do account abstractions, and it will simplify stuff a bit.
Yeah.
So we still can have account abstraction in Constantinople. We just need to figure out the nonce first.
Yeah, pre-Byzantium, I think everyone got hung up on 86 because of the nonce stuff. So maybe coming up with an alternative EIP that still deals with it
I
would
can
be
do
good.
that.
Okay, perfect, Vitalik. If you could do that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Without getting into details, I can maybe say the high-level thing of what I was thinking of, which was whether we can keep the nonce abstraction, but keep the invariant on transaction hashes being required to be unique.
That's a terrible idea because it basically places the entire list of historical transaction hashes into the implicit state.
Fair point.
So
one more thing that
Yep.
I would like to add is something that the EIP broke or almost broke. I think there was a version that maybe fixed it. Is that currently to calculate the address of the contract, of a deployed contract, we only need access to actually the sender plus the nonce. And I think the proposed account abstraction thing also required the blockchain state to figure out the deploy address. And I think that's problematic if you are, for example, out of sync, or if you are signing offline transaction or stuff like that. So I would very much prefer if we could have contract addresses generated in such a way that you can do it without having access to the blockchain itself.
that does sound like an interesting idea. All right, cool. Any other comments on this?
But the other question, besides whether account abstraction is in scope for Constantinople, would be if changing the transaction format, which might be useful in achieving account abstraction. So if changing the transaction format is in scope for Constantinople.
So that would be dependent on if we're doing abstraction or not, or would that be something that would just benefit everything overall?
Abstraction could totally be done without that, I'd say.
Okay, but it could improve it, is what Casey's saying.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Yeah,
it could be done. It could be done without it, but it could also potentially be much cleaner if
true.
If we are willing to change the transaction format.
Okay.
Right.
Go
Only
ahead,
I
Peter.
do. There's if change is really warranted for, I don't think it should be that much of a problem, since, for example, with in Byzantium we already changed the receipt format, which means that clients already support working with two types of receipts. So doing the same thing for transactions shouldn't be technically too hard, but of course it's nicer if we don't do it.
Yeah.
It's also not just clients; it's all the web wallets like MyEther wallet and so forth.
Yeah, most problematically the hardware wallets, but I'm guessing hardware wallets will have some issues with abstract accounts anyway, so that will be interesting.
Yeah, so getting them in on the conversation, I think, would help a lot. I know that Ligi and the team from MyEther wallet, I'm sure, would love to be involved in the conversation. So once an EIP is out, I'll pass that along to them. If there does become an EIP that is specific to modifying that.
You probably also want to ping Ledger and Trezor.
That's true. Yeah, the hardware wallets are definitely going to want to be involved. Okay, cool. Anything else? All right, cool. That was the last agenda topic. Any other agenda topics or things anyone wants to bring up? I'm refreshing the agenda. I think Tim was saying maybe discuss a 3 to 6 month roadmap for feature and priorities, but I think it's still a little early for that since we're still trying to come up with a better process for that. And we just discussed Constantinople, which would kind of be a roadmap in a way for the next hard fork. So I think that's fine. And then some people are interested in discussing Ether recovery or Ether rescue or whatever people want to call it options. My understanding is that Parity is still wanting to take point on coming up with some of the either EIPs or strategies surrounding that. So at this point, I think it's a good idea to wait for Parity or other people who have a high stake in this to come up with public proposals.
Yes, we are researching on locked funds in general right now, so there's not much news right now.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Since there's nothing else, I think then that can be the end of the core dev meeting. Thanks everyone for coming, and we will meet again in 2 weeks. Take note that because of different time shifts or daylight savings time or whatever across certain countries to adjust it, because it's still 1400 UTC for the time that the meetings happen. See everybody in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.